Mena-Watch, der unabhängige Nahost-Thinktank.
A very warm welcome to a brand new episode of Mena-Talk. My name is Jasmin Arémi, an editor with Mena-Watch, and I am absolutely delighted today to welcome Nima Najafi Hashemi, who is much better known as the rapper MC BASSTARD. It's truly wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
We're definitely glad you could take the time. Before we dive into the topic we're actually here to discuss today, I'd like to briefly introduce you. Many people know you as a well-established figure in the German underground rap scene. So how would you describe yourself and your musical development over the last few years?
Well, those familiar with my music probably recognize me as the horrorcore rapper. That's essentially my specialized area, and I've actually been involved in this for about 25 years now. Even longer, maybe. Yeah, about 25 years. And in the beginning, everything was very much characterized by extremely controversial, provocative lyrics, and it all had that distinct Berlin battle rap flavor, that authentic Berlin battle rap style that Savage and Sido and all the others possessed. And I must say, some of that was also a bit heavy, some of it even glorified violence, and I also had problems with the BPJM because of it, and some of my music was banned, and but I was also very young back then, you know. I started making music when I was 17 or so, and it was all a bit influenced by a kind of youthful, adolescent mindset. And later on, I just kept getting deeper and deeper into that scary, spooky theme. And that came from me reading a lot of, horror novels, Stephen King and stuff like that. And I really liked the movies. And that's what I then tried to embed into this music. And then it became my particular niche, so to speak, where people truly identified with me, and then I essentially became recognized as the founder of German horrorcore rap. And over time that became I didn't want to be confined to that, so I also began to create more lyrical content, exploring numerous socially and societally critical themes, addressing personal tragedies, and additionally, like subjects such as mental health and so forth, which were featured on my last album.
The reason I invited you is you're the son of Iranian parents.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up in Germany, so what significant role does Iran play in your art right now, especially considering all that happened in 2022?
The year 2026. Yes, that's what I meant. So I'll start from the very beginning. My dad was also a painter. The picture in the background here is one of his works. He really delved into surrealism, taking inspiration from artists like Dali and Käthe Kollwitz. They were his biggest influences. He was also a musician himself, a multi-instrumentalist, playing diverse instruments, and a poet. He never truly took my music seriously, you see, because it was just this rap stuff, and I did not play any instruments at all. I mean, I was just making some hardcore raps, you know, and he always found it a little bit skeptical. He was really quite skeptical about it all somehow. And that's also how my own expectations grew, where I didn't just want to stir up trouble, but I also wanted to create something truly valuable and meaningful. And both of my parents were very political. They were both staunch Marxist Leninists, and my mother was executed in Iran. My father was imprisoned in Evin Prison for a long time. And even in Germany, my father was still somewhat politically active, and my stepmother was involved with the PDS. And I myself I personally wasn't really always that much into politics myself, not in the same way they were, so I wouldn't really consider myself an activist. Naturally, when a certain topic is really pressing, then I'll get heated about it too, and I'll voice my opinion and try to bring some much needed attention to the issue. But in my everyday life, I'm not really out there being very much of an activist. And I also find it quite difficult to truly position myself politically, you know. Well, I have read the Communist Manifesto, and I did even start Das Kapital, but I truly couldn't find a connection to my own life's reality, so I just ended up letting it collect dust. And funnily enough, a friend was over just yesterday, and he said he was a pragmatic center-left kind of guy, and I was like, that actually sounds pretty good to me, you know? I could probably also find something to work with there. And I also don't understand how people can completely dedicate themselves to something and say, yes, this is it, and this is the ultimate truth, and nothing else is correct. And I don't know, I just can't comprehend that. I just think that life circumstances change. You develop, you learn new things, unlearn old ones, and yeah, I guess I always feel like I only know that I don't know all that much. That's truly the one thing I can confidently assert for certain.
Your father was very afraid of the regime in Iran, even later in Germany. Has this fear in any way shaped your perception of the Iranian state and perhaps also influenced your trust in the Western world?
Yeah, most definitely. So, I have this one particular story. Back then, when we were in elementary school, we were given an assignment to draw our respective flags representing our school. So the teacher said, all right, here, you should draw the flags of the countries you all come from. And I put in a really huge effort, especially with that crab in the middle. That was the focal point, really. That's quite a bit more elaborate, and I carefully drew it very finely and all that kind of detail. And then I brought it home, showed it to my dad, and he was absolutely furious, contacted the school and demanded, how can you tell these children to draw fascist symbols? And he kept saying it was like drawing a swastika, and he was completely beside himself, and I truly did not understand why he was so incredibly upset and angry. And then he began to reveal more and more and recounted what had transpired in the past, and for instance, that in the 90s his friend was also murdered by the Iranian regime in the Mykonos assassination, and this renowned singer in Bonn, I think it was Feridun Farrokhzad, he was massacred there by IRGC agents from Iran, and this entire situation, of course, then became so incredibly tainted and much darker. You know, there was also always this background that he suffered from a bit of paranoia, and at times it even proved to be true. He once had a friend who'd been in Iran, and when he returned, my father grew quite skeptical of him. Eventually, he confronted him violently, pinned him to the wall, choked him, and demanded, and what precisely did you tell them, and so forth. And it eventually came out that he had actually spoken to the Secret Service and told them things about my father. So, at times, these worries are actually quite justified. And you can see it now, too. In Hamburg recently, there was a knife attack on protesters at a demonstration. Just a few days ago in Aachen, someone actually shot at a window that had a picture of Pahlavi or something similar displayed on it. And we witness it almost every single day that Iranians are being threatened, even right here in Germany. And yeah, I'm not really sure if the German authorities are genuinely taking this seriously, but one definitely feels a certain sense of being in peril, you know, at least to some extent, on all accounts.
This threat level in Europe is definitely real. We report on it quite often. So, how exactly are you able to reconcile the current situation with the Iranian regime committing these horrific massacres, while Western media, or even the left in Israel, so sharply criticizes both Israel and the United States?
Well, you have to understand that the criticism leveled against them is absolutely necessary and at times quite justified, It's not something to be ignored. Just yesterday, Israel actually bombarded Beirut in Lebanon without any prior notice. There were 12 fatalities. In some cases, as I understand, there was no prior warning at all. Sure, one could argue that Russia has never really provided any prior warning when shelling Ukraine. One must give them credit for that, of course, but regardless, these are certainly dying civilians, and it is war, and that is always bad. On the other hand, it is not really like that, I just don't think it's that sort of black and white thinking where some are evil and some are good. It just doesn't always quite work that way, If you look at it with a bit more nuance, then I don't know. If I somehow imagine what I would have done in that very moment if my family members were to be kidnapped and taken away, would I then want them to be rescued with all possible means and resources at our disposal? Yes, of course. On the other hand, I also understand Palestinians who say, hey, we have nothing to do with Hamas. We're simply just civilians and we're getting bombed. So it's always very much, I genuinely can't say this side is wrong and that side is right. With Iran, it's a bit more of, it's a somewhat different topic because the people in Iran have been crying out for quite some time, calling for assistance and wanting to be helped. So, yes, you can still see it today. Just yesterday, I saw some graffiti where someone had spray painted, "Don't worry about the destruction. Our freedom is far more important than any material prosperity or wealth." And you can see that the people, even though they're being bombed, are more afraid that the bombing will suddenly stop and they'll be left alone with the regime again, and nothing will happen in the end because Trump might suddenly change his mind, as he so often does, and say, yeah, I'm going to make a deal after all. And you really have to realistically assess the situation, understanding that the mullah regime, I have a strong feeling that many people, particularly those from the Western corner, from the left-leaning faction in the West, have a romanticized view of the mullahs. So it sometimes seems to me that they believe the mullah regime is some kind of anti-imperialist bulwark or something, but in reality, they're entirely neoliberal, they're clerical fascist, they are in fact imperialists themselves. So you just have to name it as it is, and you can't simply wish it away, saying they're good only because they're against the US. That's just not true. I find them worse than the US and Israel. So in the US and Israel, at least, journalists are still able to report freely. In Iran, if you have journalists who report things the authorities dislike, they're thrown in prison, or in the worst case scenario, they are executed. There's gender apartheid there. Artists can't express themselves. There is no opposition. The thing that they call what they term as moderate mullahs, that's a whole circus they stage purely for the West, just to deceive us into thinking that's the genuine situation. So, for instance, it's often said that Evin Prison is the nation's elite university because that's where all the brilliant minds of Iran's most brilliant minds are all gathered together in one place. And you can't just dismiss all of that and simply say, yes, but the USA, it's really just not that simple at all.
So we just discussed the anti-imperialist left and how they tend to portray a very oversimplified perspective. But how do you view that, considering the German Western media like ZDF who describe Khamenei as an eloquent speaker in an obituary that was truly uncritical and lacking in depth. Doesn't that also kind of shape the image of Iran that people in the West might have?
I find that absolutely dreadful. When I witness such things, it truly makes my hair stand on end, and I think, how could anyone do something like that? And even now, after Larijani's passing, he was depicted as, well, he wrote his dissertation on Kant. Yeah, I mean, Hitler also painted beautiful landscapes, but you can't just limit it to that alone. I mean, I really get so when I see that, because in the end, these people are mass murderers. And you have to, when you write an obituary, you can also, if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want, you can of course also list that they somehow at Western universities sometimes taught, or what else they might have accomplished in their lives. But it's crucial to emphasize that these individuals are criminals. Otherwise, we're portraying an entirely false image to ourselves, and many people here in the West simply aren't aware of this. They then think, yeah, this is totally unjust. What's going on over there? And they are truly exceptional individuals over there. That's just a complete distortion of reality. So I genuinely find that horrible when I see it.
Mm-hmm. What would be important to you in the reporting on Iran? Do you feel there are a few points that Western journalists could perhaps address more effectively?
The focus should definitely always be on the people in Iran, because they are the ones who suffer the most from all this. And they are the loudest, and above all, their internet is shut off so that their perspective can't be seen. Here, Pleitgen from CNN gets invited, and then he's allowed to interview regime supporters with an agent constantly breathing down his neck. And then it's all presented as if the people in Iran are entirely in favor of the regime and nobody really wants war. However, the vast majority of people in Iran are simply disregarded and completely ignored. And there's simply no voice in the media that speaks up for the people in Iran, that truly endeavors to view everything from their unique perspective, because it is naturally quite a challenge. So you can't just interview people directly. You could only really do it if they were anonymized, for example. And you can't actually do that within the country's borders, because you'd obviously be putting yourself at serious risk then. Because, as I said, you always have an agent behind you, and he watches very carefully what you say and who you meet and who you talk to. Well, it's not at all simple, yet I truly believe it's an inherent part of a journalist's duty to delve precisely into those challenging situations, striving to uncover the truth there, rather than opting for the path of least resistance.
Many experts also hold the view that Europe has, in fact, stabilized the Iranian regime instead of exerting pressure, particularly by implementing very few, if any, sanctions. They've consistently responded with excessive leniency, allowing business to continue as usual. Do you also have the feeling that European policy has generally abandoned the people in Iran and continues to do so?
Well, I see it every single day. I see it right now, even worse than ever before. The regime is practically on its last legs, gasping for air. I mean, it has truly never been as weak as it is right now. And today Macron is stating that he wants to negotiate with the Iranians again. The EU constantly insists on negotiations and diplomatic efforts, even though they are fully aware it has never yielded any positive outcome. Instead, it has only served to embolden the regime, enabling them to instigate further proxy conflicts and inflict widespread suffering across the entire region, time and time again. And sometimes it truly feels to me as if they're attempting to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to a corpse, trying to resurrect the mullah regime from the dead, despite the clear fact that it has reached its absolute endpoint. I mean, it has no legitimacy in civil society. There's stagflation. the growth is in negative territory. There's very high inflation and the currency is depreciating. Those bills you see there, they're completely worthless. You could burn them and then you'd at least have a little bit of warmth. So it's completely worthless now. It has no value. It's ecologically, there's a serious water shortage situation. Last year, the country's entire water reserves were almost completely depleted. There's an absolute and total shortage. The air is completely polluted. You can't even begin to imagine how bad it is, but people there simply can't breathe anymore. The air is so polluted that that everyone in Tehran is getting sick from it. And then these mullahs suggest something like, well, we'll just have to move the capital, Tehran, to another area. And that is also completely detached from reality because they absolutely do not have the necessary resources for it. And then these sanctions are lifted, just as Obama did back in his time. Then the deal is made, and all that comes of it is even more corruption, increased mismanagement, and ultimately more proxy adventures. Everything around the entire region is plunged into wars, and I truly cannot grasp why they persist in doing this. I truly believe they just possess a completely skewed, a distorted perception of the individuals in that place. So for me, these people they are actually followers of a death cult that is actively working towards bringing on the apocalypse. That's not just some random idea I'm conjuring up. No, it's an intrinsic part of their religious beliefs that at the culmination of times, the Mahdi will indeed reappear, and essentially he will lead them out of their current circumstances. And these people believe that, and you shouldn't underestimate it. It's not just something, to us it all sounds like science fiction, but they genuinely believe in it. And yes, there actually was even a study that was conducted just a few years ago. I can't attest to its full reliability, but this independent study indicates that only about 35 to 30% of the population in the country are now Shiites, and not all of them are truly strictly devout believers. Well, if one is to believe this study, then there are currently fewer Muslims in Iran than there are Christians residing in Germany. And yes, it's not a minority, but they aren't. Like the vast majority of people there are not religious, or they practice other religions, and all of that just gets completely overlooked. So one also has to be a bit realistic.
True. In recent weeks, I've also read more often that the country is a Muslim-influenced country, which is also completely false, but that seems to be the picture that's painted. Classic left-wing imperialism in the West, as we briefly mentioned earlier, is often directed against the US and Israel. Germany always maintains a very moderate stance regarding all these trade relations with Iran, which frankly don't even yield that much financial return, I'd suggest.
Mm-hmm.
As a German Iranian, you're always kind of stuck between two stools here, aren't you? Do you still feel represented by any specific worldview at this very moment?
Yeah, I actually do ask myself that question quite often, and I don't know. I mean, currently I actually hesitate to label myself as left-wing because I'm seeing all these extremes and people who simply completely ignore the very facts we were just discussing because it simply doesn't align with their worldview. And on the other hand, I also clearly see, for instance, what's going down in the US with the ICE raids, and that a truly great injustice is unfolding there too. But it's a difficult situation. You can't really compare the two, can you? Just because there's injustice somewhere else, it doesn't mean you can minimize the massive injustices occurring in Iran and simply ignore them. I often get the feeling in left-leaning groups, there are many different factions with varying opinions, and for years now they've been engaged in trench warfare that doesn't lead to any solutions. So there's just nothing where you can say, okay, if we pursue this and that goal, then we have to do this and that. It always gets endlessly debated, then people start arguing, and then you've arrived at the end, and ultimately nothing has actually been accomplished. I'm more pragmatic, and I really just want to see some concrete results. And I do see that, for example, with the left, with the right-wing parties, they've been well past that point for a long time, haven't they? They've all come to an agreement on a goal, and with them, there's mostly some kind of agreement, and that's frankly terrifying. When I look over at our side and see, we haven't learned anything from it, and they're much further along, and it certainly doesn't give me any hope for the future, not even here in Germany either. And I find it truly impossible to identify with either one of those groups, not in the slightest. I just can't, as I've already stated, comprehend such a fixed and unchanging worldview. Marx, Lenin, Mao, none of that stuff really plays a role in my life at all. And it might actually turn out to be the case that this utopia, achievable through socialism, that it truly might someday actually become a tangible reality in the future. But as it is now, I think it's more like science fiction. So maybe, perhaps, through AI, there will eventually be a point when an AI, I imagine, attains self-awareness and greatly oppresses us. Then perhaps then we'll finally wake up and realize, okay, we absolutely have to do this in a different way. I don't know, no idea, but the way things are now, it's definitely not right, and we really don't have the time or the capacity to keep engaging in trench warfare, distracting ourselves.
The reason I'm asking you this is because ever since the 7th of October 2023, we've had such a tense situation, especially in the art and culture scene. A lot of female artists are facing boycotts simply because they hail from Israel or because they express a particular point of view. In your line of work, do you also feel this pressure from people telling you, hey, take a stand, even if it has nothing to do with your actual life? So, do you ever face that kind of experience?
No, not at all, actually. I truly believe it's quite the opposite. People rather expect me not to do political things and to just stick to that horror genre. What I do, what I'm truly renowned for. And when I then engage in politically charged work, there tends to be more criticism that it's perhaps, yes, too one-sided, much like with the last album. And I take that to heart. I mean, I think about it. I have a few political songs on my last album, No Köln in July and Banality of Evil are two songs that are very one is very against police brutality and racism in the police force, and the other is about Islamophobia and it's a bit about how the media deals with these kinds of situations and for example, are very much focused, on attacks that are perpetrated by individuals with an Islamic background. And for instance, when there's an attack by someone German, for example, they usually don't really make such a big fuss about it. And I can understand when people say that it's far too one-sided, because I personally always make an earnest effort to truly understand all different perspectives myself. That's the standard I hold myself to, I actually do have right-wing fans. Well, there are people who attend my concerts. They'll be wearing these T-shirts that just make me think, man, why do you even bother coming to my concert? I'm Iranian. Yeah, but you're not like the others. And I'm like, why? Why am I not like the others? I'm the same, a refugee too. I was in an asylum home back then as a kid. And then I try to explain my point of view to those people and maybe give them a little bit of, just a little bit of understanding that things aren't as black and white as they envision them to be in their minds. It's really not that simple. But I also have to constantly question myself about whether what I'm saying or the songs I'm making, if that's still true. Because it is simply also the case that, for example, there's a really significant threat from Islamists in Germany that, for instance, this entire network around Pierre Vogel, it has become massive without us perhaps even realizing it. He's got this entire army of TikTok preachers, and millions of people follow them, especially young people who get these Wahhabist teachings just hammered into them every single day. And that's extremely dangerous, and I think there's no focus on that at all. People don't even realize how dangerous it is. And I always try to find some sort of middle ground and illuminate all sides of the issue. Sometimes I manage it, sometimes not as much, but I certainly give it my best effort. And I do believe currently, due to the fact that we are so heavily influenced by algorithms, it all becomes incredibly difficult. So we always get confirmation from our bubble, which we're always consuming every single day. And that really leads to a situation where if opposing opinions arise that challenge ours, we completely shut down and declare, no, that can't possibly be true, it's incorrect. And we completely block it out, wanting absolutely nothing to do with it. But there's another truth out there. It's not just your own. And my standard for myself is that I also try to shed light on that, even if it's hard for me personally, and I really have to push myself sometimes, but I think it's worth it.
Do you get any sort of pushback from that Islamist scene, or is there any mobilization directed against you, or are you truly so politically neutral at the moment that that hasn't happened to you just yet?
Yeah, I receive many hate messages and other things, but regarding that, I know one simply cannot reason with those individuals. They just are. It simply doesn't work. And I've tried it a few times, and I know it's just, well, they are not going to admit to viewing things from my perspective, from my point of view. And no matter how hard I try, I've tried often enough, and unfortunately, all I can do is block them and say, "Hey, I have other things to do. Sorry," because
what exactly is the criticism of you?
Of course, that I'm somehow. They tell me that I'm on the side of the USA or Israel, or that I'm a Zionist or a monarchist, a traitor, a fascist, I don't know what else. And for them, it's just very hard to comprehend. They truly don't comprehend the sheer desperation and profound rage that compels someone to wish their own country to be bombed, all for the sake of ridding themselves of these mullahs and reclaiming their lives. They truly can't grasp that. How could they? They haven't lived under the mullahs. They simply don't know what it's like. Their family members weren't executed, and their friends weren't gunned down this past January. And then you see these individuals in Tehran scaling their rooftops at night, joyfully celebrating, smoking cigarettes, or even barbecuing, drinking beer and making toasts. And onlookers witness this and simply cannot fathom how such a thing is even conceivable. And that's just how it is. So the people are thrilled about it, and they're more scared, as I mentioned, that it will come to an end, and that they will ultimately still have to somehow come to terms with the mullahs, and probably with much, much, much more radicalized mullahs then, which is a terrifying prospect for them.
You serve as a kind of bridge for individuals who find themselves caught between two different countries of origin, perhaps also residing in Germany. Regarding your critical, reflective way of thinking, what would you say to those who also have trouble, perhaps, identifying with their country of origin, but maybe also with their new home country, and have to endure these ambivalences? Do you have any message for them?
I honestly feel that, above all else, one really always must listen closely to their gut feeling. Well, every country truly has its own distinct culture, you know? And its own traditions, its own religions, and yes, even the very way people speak, their language. And if you embrace that, it's truly wonderful, especially if you grow up with it, if you can genuinely experience multiple cultures. I think that's always a gain, and it helps you in life. On the other hand, perhaps one also needs to learn to just let go when it no longer feels right. And if one is, for instance, constricted in some way or bound by dogmas and perhaps compelled to practice a religion that one doesn't truly understand or cannot genuinely endorse. And that really is a very difficult situation for a lot of people. I can understand that, and it's not easy to break free from perhaps a conservative family home when you're living between these two worlds. However, I would say it's invariably worthwhile because I'm not religious at all. I mean, maybe I was religious as a child, but I shed that very quickly, and I believe that there is only this one life, and that there will be no afterlife, and it would be a real shame if this life couldn't be enjoyed. So it's always worth it to move, to embrace freedom and truly liberate yourself, allowing you to fully live out your desires and indeed your dreams. That's always truly worth fighting for.
One last question for you. What are you currently working on, musically speaking? Will there be new music from you soon? Are you on tour right now? I saw you also have various reading tours. We'll link those too. Maybe say a few words about it.
Yeah, I have a solo album finished. Well, almost finished. There's still one song missing that isn't quite in the can yet. I've been working on this album for what feels like an eternity, truly, since 2013, so that's 13 whole years now, and it's just incredibly intricate, everything about it. Back then, I started with a whole lot of live instruments, with taiko drums, violins, choirs, and guitars, drums, and everything you can imagine. I recorded all of that live, and then I ended up with these monstrous recording sessions with like 200 tracks, and I never dared to touch them. I always thought, man, this is never going to work. Who's going to mix this? And then I actually managed to get my friend Chico to take it on. He took it upon himself, and first he and I went through and sorted out many tracks, and now we're on a very good path forward. A substantial number of these songs are already complete, and yes, it's very much a return to my roots, very dark thematically, very, yes, mystical in nature. For instance, a significant portion of these songs are essentially about female demonic deities that are present in all the different cultures across the globe, and in stark contrast, this rather weak, somewhat driven man who's just kind of frantically chasing after them. And thematically, it's very quite unusual for me, actually. It's taking a new direction, although, of course, it's all incredibly dark, and it definitely possesses this complete horror vibe. Yet, it's still something totally fresh from me, and I believe I'm endeavoring to somewhat reinvent the old bastard with it, and I truly hope people will like it.
Thank you very much, Nima, for the clear perspectives and for the personal insights as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, activate the bell, share the conversation on social media, and you can find more analyses, background information, and conversations regularly on Mena-Watch. My name is Jasmin Arémi. Until the next Mena-Talk. Thank you.
Mena-Watch, der unabhängige Nahost-Thinktank. Besuchen Sie auch unsere Website. Dort finden Sie täglich neue aktuelle Berichte und ausführliche wissenschaftlich fundierte Hintergrundanalysen zur Geschichte und Gegenwart der MENA-Region.